Now, much like grocery store tomatoes have given hybrid tomatoes a bad rap over the years, I feel like grocery store watermelons have given seedless watermelons a bad rap over the years. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an amazing day. It is Saturday, April 15th here in South Georgia, and we're finally going to get our watermelon seeds started in the greenhouse today. Going to talk about the varieties we're growing, tell you about some tips I've learned over the years getting seedless watermelon seeds to germinate. But before we go there, let's check on our onion plot here where our watermelons are going to be planted whenever these onions are done. Now, normally we would have already had our watermelon plants in the ground down here come mid-April, but we've been waiting on these monster onion plants to fall over and quit growing. Now, over here in these 2 rows that we planted late, we're just going to have some average size onions. That's what I'm seeing with this Georgia Boy variety and then with this White Phantom variety right here. But for these 3 rows that we planted back in early November, we've got some doozies out here. So those are our round sweet onions there, a variety called Timon. Got a row full of monsters there. And then for our flattened or granite style sweet onions, we've got a variety called DP Sweet, and we've got some absolute monsters in there. Now, the weeds have gotten the best of me over the last few weeks because there's just so much foliage there. It's hard to weed it with a tool. I've just been trying to pull a few here and there by hand, but they're growing faster than I can pull them. And then for these Chianti red onions, which from my experiences take a little longer to mature, get some nice sizing up on those as well. That one there is already bigger than a baseball, and it'll probably end up being bigger than a softball by the time it's all over. So we've just been patiently waiting on these onions as they keep growing and getting bigger and bigger. I didn't really want to start my watermelon seeds too early, because if I had transplants ready to go in the ground and still onions everywhere, then I'd be in a little bit of a pickle. So I wanted to wait until some of the tops on these onions started to fall over. That would tell me, okay, we're getting close to the end with the onions, and we're starting to see that on a few of them. So in some of these DP Sweets here, we can see the plants have indeed fallen over. The neck gets soft and then they just kind of collapse on over. That means the plant's not really sending any more energy down to that onion bulb, and they're pretty much done growing. So that's when we can kind of pull them up. A nice one right there. Not quite as big, still a nice onion right there. That's a monster right there, goodness gracious. Hard to be ashamed growing an onion that big. Several good ones right there. And so normally what we'll do is just lay these on the soil a few days, assuming we're not getting any rain, and let them dry out here a little bit before we put them under the barn. I might do that with a couple of these, but I'm also going to take a couple of these inside to eat tonight and tomorrow night. So these are some big onions, but believe it or not, these are not the biggest ones in that row. There are some that are bigger than these that haven't fallen over quite yet. They're still growing a little bit. But I'm pretty happy with what we're seeing so far with the size on these, and I can't even imagine what they would look like had they not gotten completely burnt back by that Arctic blast right before Christmas. Now, before we go to the greenhouse and start some watermelon seeds, I wanted to address a question we've been getting a lot on social media lately. Been having a lot of people say, well, my onions are flowering or they're bolting. What do I need to do? So onion bolting or onion flowering is usually something you don't want to see. That means that onion is not going to store for a long time. These things will store a lot better if we pull them when the tops fall over, let them cure in the sun a few days, and then move them to a cooler spot. That's the ideal scenario. If they start flowering, your best bet is to go ahead and pull them and eat them as soon as possible. They're not going to store real well. Now, as far as what to do to prevent them from flowering or bolting, that's a little tougher question to answer, but I'll tell you kind of what I've learned over the years. So some varieties are more prone to bolting or flowering than others. Sometimes if the weather gets real wacky in spring, onions will bolt or flower, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I have found over the years as I've shifted to all hybrid onion varieties that they seem to bolt a lot less than some of the old school onion varieties out there. So you might want to try growing some hybrids if you always have problems with onions bolting. Another thing I always try to do is make sure these things have plenty of water. When they're bulbing like this, we keep that soil moist 24/7. We're running the drip on those onions 4 or 5 hours every other day, assuming no rainfall. Keep the soil moist, keep those plants from being stressed. That should help out some too. And lastly, just know that red onions are very prone to bolting compared to, say, white or yellow onions. Now, this Chianti variety that we like to grow seems to be pretty good about not bolting. Didn't have any issues last year, haven't had any issues this year so far. Now, I know that doesn't help any of y'all that are not in a short day onion growing region, but that's back to what I was saying earlier. The hybrids seem to bolt less than the old school varieties. All right, so now let's talk about watermelons. So over the last few years, I've really gotten into growing seedless watermelons, all different colors of seedless watermelons, red, orange. This year we're going to try some yellow seedless watermelons. The first year I tried, I wasn't that great at it. Got a little better the second year. Last year we did pretty good. I'm still not to the level of a commercial seedless watermelon grower by any means, but my kids, my wife, and the neighbors' ducks think I do a pretty good job, so that's all that matters. Now, before we talk about the varieties that we're going to grow this year and how to get these pesky seeds to germinate, let's talk about how do we get a seedless watermelon, or more importantly, how do we get a seedless watermelon seed to plant? So this all has to do with the number of copies of chromosomes that a plant has. A standard watermelon plant, something like a Crimson Sweet, Charleston Gray, Sugar Baby, are going to have 2 copies of each chromosome, just like us humans. But to create sterility, or a seedless watermelon in this case, we need to have 3 copies of each chromosome. Now, as far as I understand it, this is how the plant breeders do it. So they take a standard watermelon variety that has 2 copies of each chromosome. They treat it with something called colchicine, which is actually used to treat gout in humans. What that does is it doubles the chromosome number on that watermelon plant. So when that plant produces fruits, the seeds inside the fruit have 4 copies of each chromosome. So that's what we have here with these seedless watermelon seeds. Each of these seeds has 4 copies of each chromosome. So these seedless watermelon seeds aren't really going to do anything just planted by themselves. That's why these seeds are so expensive, because the plant breeders have to go through this each time they want to create a seed crop. To get the seedless watermelon, you have to plant these seedless seeds with 4 copies of each chromosome, along with some standard watermelon varieties that have 2 copies of each chromosome. When you get cross-pollination between these 2, we end up with a watermelon that has 3 copies of each chromosome that is sterile or seedless. Now, there are some people out there that feel that using colchicine to double the chromosome number is an unnatural process and you're playing with the genetics too much, and if that's how you feel, that's okay. I'm not here to change your mind. But I can tell you that these modern day seedless watermelon varieties are fun to grow once you get the hang of it, and they are really, really tasty, and you get a much better consistency with the fruit size than you do some of the older varieties out there. Now, much like grocery store tomatoes have given hybrid tomatoes a bad rap over the years, I feel like grocery store watermelons have given seedless watermelons a bad rap over the years. Just because you go to the grocery store and buy some seedless watermelon and it's not ripe, that doesn't mean all seedless watermelons are terrible. It just means the one you got wasn't picked at peak ripeness. When you grow them in your own backyard and you can keep an eye on them every day and you can pick one at peak ripeness, the flavor and the sweetness of these seedless ones blows the doors off those old school varieties. We've done a lot of trials over the last couple of years comparing seedless watermelons to a bunch of old school varieties that had a lot of rave reviews, and these seedless ones just are so much better. There's been a lot of improvement over the years as far as getting some really good sweetness and flavor into these newer watermelon varieties. So now let's talk about the varieties that we're going to be growing, both the seedless types and the pollinator types that we need to create that seedless or triploid watermelon. So the first one we have here is a yellow seedless watermelon called Tropical Sunshine. According to Johnny's, this is their best tasting yellow seedless watermelon. I think it makes a watermelon around 11 or 13 pounds. The pictures look really, really good. I'm excited to try this one because we've never grown a yellow seedless watermelon. And then I've got one more seedless variety here. I just couldn't help myself on this one. I didn't order this one at the same time I did that Tropical Sunshine. I was on Johnny's website getting something else, and I just happened to see this and I said I got to try this one. So this is a red seedless variety called Cracker Jack that looked pretty dang good. We're going to try that one as well. Now when you buy seedless watermelon seeds from Johnny's, they include a packet of the pollinator or the diploid standard variety that you need to cross-pollinate with the seedless varieties. The one they always include is called Ace. Pretty sure this is not a watermelon you want to eat, but that's how the commercial guys do it. They grow basically an inedible watermelon out there as a pollinator, something that looks completely different from the seedless watermelons, so they can easily distinguish them in the field. But I'm not going to grow the Ace. I don't ever grow the Ace. I like to pick my own pollinator, one that we can actually eat. So the pollinator we're going to be growing is this one here called Sureness. This is a yellow seeded watermelon. This is what they call an icebox watermelon. It only gets 8 or 10 pounds, kind of a small round watermelon, kind of like the ones you see in the grocery store. Nice personal size watermelon. Now when you're growing the seedless watermelons, the pollinator doesn't have to be the same color as the seedless watermelons. You could grow a yellow pollinator and a red seedless, or a red pollinator and a yellow or orange seedless. That doesn't matter. And then lastly, besides all these hybrid watermelons, we've got some giant watermelon seeds that were sent to us by Ryan over at Heavenly Hills Homestead. Same guy that sent us those giant sunflower, giant pumpkin, giant butternut seeds. Supposedly, these can grow a 300+ pound watermelon. So these are the seeds he uses to grow giant watermelons competitively. He says that around 90 days, these can easily be 150 pounds or so. And if you want to eat them, pull them at 90 days, eat them. They're pretty dang good. But if you want to grow a giant one, leave it out there, let it continue to grow. It's going to be overripe, so you're not going to be able to eat it, but you will have some bragging rights because you might have a 300 pound watermelon. What I would do is plant a few of these, eat some of the ones at 90 days, then leave a few out there just to see how big they'll get. So we're going to plant a few of these, and then by the time this video airs, we'll have what we have left here. We'll get those packed up, put those on our website in case any of y'all want to try them. So we talked about how seedless watermelon seeds are made. We talked about the varieties we're going to be growing. Now let's talk about how to get these pesky things to germinate. Now, trying to germinate seedless watermelon seeds is not something I would recommend for a beginner seed starter. But if you're pretty good at starting seeds, growing your own transplants, you can probably handle it. I wouldn't do it if it was my first year trying to grow my own tomato or pepper transplants. It is a good bit more tricky than just your basic seed starting stuff. Now the commercial guys use germination chambers, and they've got specialized ways of doing this and getting really good germination with these seedless seeds. Obviously most of us don't have a germination chamber. All I have is a greenhouse here, but there are some tips and tricks I can help you with to get a better germination from these. You're probably still not going to get as good a germination on the seedless seeds as you would a standard watermelon variety, but I can help you get close. So the two main things to remember here: don't overwater and provide consistent heat. So unlike other seeds where we plant them and we want to water them every day, get them up going, get them germinated, with these seedless seeds we just want them watered one time, and then we don't want to water them anymore until they germinate. We also want to provide some consistent heat, somewhere in the 85 to 95 degree range, for the first 4 or 5 days or until these things germinate. So we'll demonstrate both of those tips here in a minute, but before you plant your seeds, one thing I did last year that seemed to really help was nicking the end of this watermelon seed. I've got one of these giant watermelon seeds here just because it's easier to see. So on a watermelon seed, you've got kind of a pointed end and you've got kind of a rounded end. Don't cut the pointed end, but on the rounded end, what I do is take a pair of fingernail clippers and just barely clip off the end there that's rounded. It's going to make it easier for water to get inside that seed and hopefully make it germinate faster. So I've already done that with all my seedless seeds. Put them back in the packet. They're ready to go. Not going to do that with these standard watermelon seeds or these giant watermelon seeds. So right here I've got our PropTech 162 tray. I came in here earlier today. I filled it with Pro Mix. Went ahead and pre-moistened this soil and got it on the heat mat. Got the heat mat turned on. Got the thermostat cranked up over there. And what I was trying to do here is kind of preheat this soil a little bit. So what I don't want to do is plant watermelon seeds in here and then water them in with some cold water, and then it's going to cool down on my seed starting mix here. So my goal was to go ahead and get everything moistened and nice and warmed up. So all we really got to do is put those seeds in these cells here, cover them up, and we're good to go. I'll show you another little trick with a saran wrap in a minute. So we've got our thermostat set as high as it can go over there. I think it's showing that the soil is at 83 degrees right now, so it could stand to warm up a little bit more, but it's certainly not cold. So we're going to go ahead and start getting these seedless seeds dropped here. Only one seed per cell. These seeds are a little pricey. We don't want to double plant them, and I would recommend planting more than you think you're going to need, because you're not going to get 100% germination on these unless you've got a fancy germination chamber. So we probably only need about 20 or so transplants, but I've got 50 seeds here. I'm going to plant them all. I'm sure I can find someone who would like to plant some if I do end up having extra transplants. And one more little tip that we'll cover more when we actually put these puppies in the ground. You need 3 times as many seedless transplants as you need pollinator or seeded transplants. So keep that in mind when you're planting these. You got to plant these at a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 seedless for every 1 seeded. Alright, so that's all our tropical sunshine there, and we'll move on to our Cracker Jack. Alright, so we got all those seeds down there. We got about 2/3 of the tray with the seedless varieties, tropical sunshine, and Cracker Jack. The other third of the tray with seeded varieties, mostly Sureness here. I did one little lane for the giant watermelons. Probably not going to need but just a few plants of those. Now we need to cover up these seeds here, and this is where our little perlite trick that we do with everything can really come in handy, especially on these seedless watermelons, because this is going to keep everything from being too moist on that seed there. Remember, we want to minimize moisture. We just want enough moisture to trigger germination there. We don't want these seeds to get too wet because they'll just rot. So we got all those seeds covered with perlite, and now to kind of preserve that moisture, create a nice humid environment, and to keep us from wanting to water these things, we're going to wrap the tray in plastic wrap here. Now if you were dealing with a smaller tray and you had a humidity dome that would fit that tray, that would probably work just fine in place of the plastic wrap. But I don't have a dome that will fit this tray, so we're going to use the wrap. Now that there is a little tricky to do by yourself, probably a lot easier with 2 people. What I did was I slid it off the end here, wrapped just this little end of the tray, moved my markers over to the opposite side, then flipped it around, wrapped the rest of the tray. We got it nice and snug now. So all we need to do, slide it back on there, get it on that heat mat, set it and forget it. Don't need to give them any water. All we need to do is make sure we can keep this tray warm, at least 85 degrees. It's hanging in there pretty good right now. I probably need to let these windows down, especially at night. Might even need to run a heater at night, trying to keep this consistently between 85 to 95 degrees. So now we'll just keep a close eye on this tray, watch for some seedlings popping through there. Once we get seedlings popping up all over the tray, we'll cut that plastic wrap off, pull it off. We still need to leave them on the heat mat, and we still need to be really careful about overwatering those seedless seedlings. So if you've never tried growing seedless watermelons and want a good challenge, I would encourage you to give it a try. If you follow our steps here, you should be fairly successful. Like I said, probably not going to get 100% germination, but you'll get good enough germination to make it worth your money buying that seed packet, and you'll really enjoy the seedless watermelons that you get. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Be sure to check out our affiliate links in the description below, and also check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see some of our seedless watermelons from last year, an orange seedless variety we grew, check out this video right here where we harvest a couple of those and enjoy them. They were really, really good. They taste as good as they look. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.